HE News, episode number 21. You're listening to another episode of Health Empowerment News with CROFT WOODRUFF. This week, the swine flu H1N1 conspiracy revisited. Welcome back to Health Empowerment News with CROFT WOODRUFF. My name is Andrew McGivern, and I'm here in the Vancouver studio with CROFT. Hello, CROFT.
Good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm doing well, and today we're going to revisit the H1N1 swine flu epidemic and everything that's gone on since. And recently, there's been a lot of news stories about the H1N1 hitting India again. Investigation into a possible conspiracy with some ties to Big Pharma, the people that were supplying the World Health Organization with information. And the WHO has actually gone on to some of the social media sites like Twitter and have been distancing themselves from these people who they relied on pertinent information in order to create this pandemic fear in order to get everybody vaccinated. What do you think of that, CROFT?
Well, I guess you could call that, psychosomatic disease caused by scaring people into a negative state of mind, which can impair their immune system and make them more susceptible to illness than they would otherwise be. The problem is, of course, is that there's money to be made with these vaccines. And from the standpoint of the developer of the vaccine, and one of the most notorious ones, his name I forget, but he's an inventor of vaccines that have been implicated with causing autism in children, and anti-diarrhea vaccines I'm thinking of, and of course, I guess flu vaccines as well. We're fooling around with foreign proteins and other chemicals that we're injecting into the bloodstream of young people, particularly whose immune systems are not fully developed, and they become compromised. And then on the other hand, just depending on the overall status of health of a population will determine how susceptible they're going to be to a flu epidemic that is caused by fear-mongering. Because I think that's what we're looking at, is they plant a seed of fear, and the result is that people imagine themselves into being sick where otherwise they wouldn't be if these matters were dealt with in a more practical way, that you can strengthen your immune system by changing your diet and improving the quality of your diet. When you're dealing with these massive populations where food can be of poor quality, can be contaminated, maybe in short supply, then you're wide open for anything. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's caused by a virus, but these other circumstances. People become ill because of a vitamin or mineral deficiency. People become ill because they are poisoned from some toxin in the food chain, like pesticides and herbicides. And this business of these vaccines supposed to be preventing the disease. Well, we saw what happened here in our own bailiwick here in British Columbia. There was no epidemic. And only a few months ago, we were told that they had about $80 million worth of vaccine that they're going to have to discard because it has expired. And obviously what they did have wasn't any good anyways because it didn't work. I think they got a flu anyway.
Mm-hmm. And it goes a lot more beyond this. The mainstream media was really focused on getting the message out that everybody needs to be vaccinated. Now, some of the mainstream media are reporting that this could have been a big conspiracy. The WHO has taken to Twitter in order to distance themselves from these people who have been sending them this information about the pandemic or the possible risk of a pandemic. And it's clear that it is overhyped right from the beginning. And a report that just came out of the Council of Europe has come up with some devastating conclusions. The declaration of a pandemic led to a waste of huge sums of public money, a distortion of priorities in public health services, the provocation of unjustified fear, and the creation of health risks through vaccines and medications that may have not been sufficiently tested. And this is coming from mainstream media sources in Europe. And they are under investigation there because it's ridiculous what, a little bit of information twisted and sent in through official channels. And next thing you know, we've got a mainstream news, almost fear entertainment. It seemed like what it was.
Well, the problem is, of course, what do they make these vaccines out of? Foreign proteins that can set off immune responses when they're injected into the muscle tissue or into the bloodstream. You have chemicals like the mercury and aluminum compounds and other compounds whose toxicity really hasn't been fully understood, if at all. You have a situation where if the vaccine causes something, well, they can say, well, we had the wrong batch, or it was a different virus, or they have all kinds of excuses to get out from under. But the bottom line is that these vaccines, I think, are causing more problems than what they solve. Certainly, we have this whole ongoing situation with regard to the connection between vaccines and childhood autism. And some of these metals like mercury and aluminum salts that are in these vaccines are believed to be directly implicated in causing autism. But that's not to say that adults themselves can't be adversely affected by being injected with mercury and aluminum salts, as well as these other foreign proteins. Foreign proteins, of course, come from the diseased tissues in which the vaccines are incubated in, like monkey tissue, for instance, or perhaps rodent tissue, for all I know, or dog or cat or whatever. But they say, it just seems that immunology as it stands today is more like witchcraft, eye of newt and tongue of toad. And they seem to think that health can be obtained out of vaccines derived from or incubated in the diseased tissues of other animals other than human beings. And that's not to say that would say that they should be incubating the vaccines in human beings. I think there are better ways to be dealing with potential viral infections, and that is by boosting the body's immune system so that it can cope with influences that we are exposed to, whether it's in the food or the air we breathe or the water we drink. But all of these areas have to be addressed as sources of possible illness. Certainly we have big problems with pollution these days, and I can imagine what it's like in third world countries where the sewage facilities are probably not there at all. And you have the breakdown of even in modern societies in Europe and in North America, where because of the lack of tax money, municipalities aren't able to maintain the quality of delivery of potable water, as well as the treatment and dispersal of sewage. So, and of course, above all, diet. Diet is everything. You are what you eat. And of course, when you look at the quality of the food in the marketplace, it's sugar, sugar, sugar. And sugar is an immune suppressor on its own right. White cell activity can be suppressed for a period of 5 hours for every teaspoon of white sugar ingested. So you get a 10-ounce can of soda that has about 10 teaspoons of sugar. You've got about 50 hours of impaired immune function because the white cell activity will be reduced by as much as 50% for each, I think it's 5 hours for each teaspoon of sugar consumed. You have an impaired immune system for a 5-hour period. So 10 teaspoons, that's about 50 hours that a person's immune system has been attacked or suppressed because of the immune suppressing effect of sugar. And of course, so we're eating a lot of foods that are over-refined. Minerals and vitamins have been taken out, and we're just left with starches and sugars and certain oils that in their own right might be harmful. And this stuff is allowed in the marketplace. We're seeing recalls of stuff that hasn't been properly processed. And this goes on and on and on. And people have to get back to the basics of what are they putting into their bodies, what are they eating. And for one thing, we're not getting enough of whole foods, which means vegetables and whole grains and whole fruit. Everything is processed or raised in a way that the cheapest way possible, and that means that the quality and for nutritional value is not likely to be there. That's where we're getting our epidemics from, I think, is people eating too much of the wrong things, and everybody's body has the same status as far as immune efficiency is concerned, so they're going to be more susceptible to an epidemic. I think sometimes it's a miracle that we don't have more epidemics than what we do. But I think, too, it has a lot to do with people are becoming more conscious of what they're putting into their body in terms of the quality of food. And that can make a big difference. But certainly I don't think they're going to find an answer to disease in a hypodermic needle with injections of foreign proteins and toxic chemicals.
So a lot of what you're talking about right now is prevention. So what about when there is an epidemic? Is there anything, do you ever recommend or believe that vaccines are warranted?
No, I don't see any value for vaccines at all. I think that, for one thing, if a person is concerned about coming down with an illness, then they should cut out all refined carbohydrates. That's white sugar, white flour, and anything made with these things. And they should stay away from artificial colors and artificial flavors, because these chemicals can have an adverse effect on immune function as well. And also they should concentrate more on whole foods of vegetables and fruit and whole grains, and go easy on animal protein. It requires a tremendous amount of metabolic energy to break down animal protein. I mean, that's why we make hydrochloric acid in our stomachs. And we need that to literally tear the protein apart so that the body can utilize it properly. With whole foods like starches and vegetable protein and these sort of things, they're much easier digested and assimilated and utilized. And of course, drinking potable water, pure water, is very important. And certainly vitamin supplementation. Vitamin C is a powerful antibacterial and antiviral agent. And people really don't get enough. And if they're consuming an awful lot of sweets and that, then they're leaving the door wide open, because it becomes a battle between too much sugar and the vitamin C can only do so much.
During the swine flu pandemic, people who were speaking out against the vaccine and against the whole mass media frenzy against the epidemic, or against the swine flu, were labeled as on the fringe. You were on CBC radio and you were debating a medical doctor on the issue, and of course there was Chris Shaw talking about the ingredients of the vaccines, the squalene and the adjuvants, and the connection to neurological disorders. Now we've got the Council of Europe investigating the World Health Organization. And I'll just read from, I believe his name is Ray Moynihan, a journalist that wrote an article about this whole issue. And he says that a series of investigations have been launched into how authorities handled the swine flu, with the damning Council of Europe report 1 year after it was first completed. It originated from a motion tabled in the 47-nation Parliamentary Assembly titled "Fake Pandemics, a Threat for Health." It identified three key problems. First, WHO's excessive response and pandemic declaration. Second, excessive secrecy surrounding decision-making. And third, the possibility of undue influence by drug companies through financial ties to key decision-makers. The report explains that the WHO description of the definition of a pandemic was actually changed in May 2009 after the first case of swine flu were reported. The change seemed to have removed the requirement that the virus impact be severe, before a pandemic was declared. The report also cites within the scientific community that the WHO rapidly moved towards declaring pandemic level 6 in June 2009 when swine flu presented relatively mild symptoms. It went on to state that the declaration of the pandemic was only made possible by changing the definition and by lowering the threshold for its declaration. But it was this all-important declaration which triggered pre-pandemic planning that would move to the highly lucrative drug industry. Pharmaceutical companies had a strong vested interest in the declaration of a pandemic, the report states. At the same time, the membership list of the WHO's 16-member emergency committee, which was instrumental in declaring the pandemic, remained secret, a lack of transparency strongly attacked by this report. The British Medical Journal published its own journalistic investigation revealing that specialists with financial links to the drug industry were intimately involved in WHO pre-pandemic planning. For example, the WHO guidance for antiviral medicines, including Roche's Tamiflu, was authored by an influenza expert who at the same time was receiving payments from Roche. The British Medical Journal also exposed the identities of 3 members of the secret emergency committee, including one with financial ties to the pharmaceutical industry. As part of the call for the major cleanup, both the British Medical Journal and the Council of Europe want health decision-making bodies to be entirely free of members with financial ties to drug makers. And it goes on, but Croft, what do you think about that?
You have obviously conflicts of interest because they have a vested interest in the vaccines themselves. And of course, they also get paid for telling lies, really, when it comes down to it. You have, like I ran up against a general practitioner who's trying to tell me that mercury is not toxic, that aluminum is not toxic. I mean, these are the kind of people that the media relies on for information, and of course, as I say, it's just outright propaganda, and they get away with it. There's no accountability at all when these things go wrong. And of course, it is the gullible public that ends up by paying the price. And I think they're going to get health out of a needle.
The doctor, the gentleman that you were debating, he said that you get less mercury from a swine flu injection than you do from a tuna fish sandwich.
Yeah, well, of course, there's one thing about your digestive system. It does censor these things, so you'll only absorb so much. But in the case of a vaccine, you're putting it either right into the muscle tissue itself or else into the bloodstream. And something like about 91% of our immune system is through the gut. And so what are these people talking about? They're very dangerous people because they lead a lot of people down to a lifetime of illness or worse.
So now these accusations that are now coming against the swine flu pandemic conspiracy, they're not coming from veteran conspiracy theorists anymore. The people who are now criticizing the WHO and the pharmaceutical industry for this conspiracy, which is an accurate description, they're coming from places like the British Medical Journal, the Council of Europe. All sorts of other doctors who were previously silent are now coming out and speaking out against this whole scenario. In the future, do you think this kind of situation is going to happen again, or are we going to put safeguards in? Because remember, it did happen in 1976 as well.
Wherever there's a potential to make a lot of money, I'm afraid that you're going to find skullduggery when it comes to science and medicine, as you will anywhere else. And this has been the case with these vaccines in the past, vaccines that didn't work and in many cases caused more problems than what they were supposed to prevent. And it's always that way when there's profits to be made. And of course, eventually, of course, you get scientists, people who have standards, ethics, who recognize what is going on, and they will speak up and hopefully be able to sound the alarm. But unfortunately, we have a media that does very little investigating these days. They're quite happy to get the press release and pass it on.
Yeah, well, it was I couldn't believe how much coverage the swine flu got during the height of the pandemic, and there wasn't a pandemic.
They sold an awful lot of vaccines, didn't they? And I remember in this province, British Columbia, it turned out that all this vaccine that they had purchased, I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $80 to $90 million worth, they were going to have to dump because it was expired. They had been too optimistic, and of course they didn't have an epidemic. Now they're trying to tell us that there is one coming anyways. I guess I figure if they keep guessing long enough, they might hit the mark.
There has been some cases of swine flu returning in India. There's been a number of deaths. But remember back during the swine flu epidemic several months ago here, they reported each and every death of the swine flu, which just added to the hysteria. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, we've got a regular seasonal flu that we have. There's about 3 to 4 times as many deaths from the regular seasonal flu as there was from the swine flu, but you don't hear it on the radio. They don't report every death. Oh, a child just died and somebody's grandpa just died and this, that, and the other. They don't report it because it's just normal death rate from a regular seasonal flu. Totally different scenario with the swine flu when you put these deaths under a microscope and put a human face to the person and tell a story, and it just causes a panic.
You might find that the death has actually been induced by the treatment that they received. And, when you look at some of these, not just the vaccines, but some of these drugs, I'm thinking particularly of something like Tylenol, which can bring on liver failure. And some of these other so-called antiviral drugs, or anti-pain drugs particularly, of which Tylenol is the one that is apparently the most prescribed. So who's to say how much of these deaths are actually iatrogenesis caused by the physician and the treatment administered by the physician rather than by other causes? But again, it goes back to you are what you eat, and these epidemics tend to follow the dietary pattern of summer holidays. People are out eating all kinds of sugar-sweetened sodas and fruit juices with very high sugar content, and of course other things like candy and that. And not getting enough of the vitamins, minerals, and fiber that they really need to maintain, a balanced state in their body. And that is never accounted for. But this is what's going on all the time. And so you can be sure that, I guess, if they've had a very profitable season in terms of ice cream and candy sales, you can expect a good flu season in the fall.
And then, of course, after Christmas holidays as well.
Christmas time or after Christmas and New Year's, you've got about 2 weeks of celebration and overindulgence, everything from alcohol to turkey and pork and I guess beef to an extent, and lots of sweets and maybe not enough vegetables. People turn up their nose at Brussels sprouts, for instance. But the bottom line is that there's a price to be paid for that. And the people who eat sensibly concentrate more on the whole foods and very easy on the refined carbohydrates as well as animal protein. Requires a terrific amount of metabolic energy to digest animal protein. And I think this is one reason why, as a rule, vegetarians tend to live longer than people who are heavy into eating animal protein.
Anything more to say on the swine flu conspiracy, CROFT?
Well, the bottom line is that the vaccines are very profitable. This has been quite a bandwagon that the pharmaceutical industry has been on. And now we have other problems that they don't seem to have any answers for, like HIV. And of course, we're also looking at the fact that they're not really paying as much attention to nutrition as they should be, and this situation in places like India where they're having this swine flu epidemic popping up. Well, look at the diet of these people, and how the quality of their food, and of course now that we're into using pesticides and herbicides, these are going to influence the quality of the vegetables and fruit and grains that are grown on these soils that are so treated, and of course people are ingesting it, and the body's got to deal with that. So there are other issues that are going to have an influence. And the only answer is that watch what you put into your body, and watch what you eat, because you are in effect what you eat, the sum total of not only what you eat, how well you digest it, and how well you eliminate it. So the bottom line is whole food, clean, potable water, and fresh air and sunshine.
Okay, there you have it. And I will put a link to all of these articles and the WHO report, or the WHO twittering on Twitter, defending themselves, saying they didn't know and that they're not guilty. Also the ABC article, the swine flu conspiracy article, and the British medical journal's report on the inappropriate behavior of the WHO. And so that'll all be there at www.foodsarenotdrugs.com. And Croft is motioning to me. I'm not sure what he's saying.
It's the almighty dollar. You know, everything has to be at a profit. And there's been a lot of profit in these vaccines, but I think there's a few of these turkeys that are coming home to roost now, and they're doing more harm than good. I think the autism epidemic is a perfectly good example of what has happened with these vaccines. Toxic proteins, toxic minerals like aluminum and mercury, and that's just basically what we're going to have to be putting up with. And I've seen some interesting articles about children being cured of their autism with chelation therapy. What are they chelating out of the system but toxic minerals like aluminum and also fluoride?
Yeah, and we've talked about that in a previous episode. And profit, I don't really have a problem with profit. Just excessive profits to the point where they can control the media, control the people who are supposed to be regulating them, and control the World Health Organization to the point where they're creating a marketing campaign for their product.
It's a marketing campaign for profit, of course, and of course, prevention is everything, and it is the cheapest route to go. But as one physician said, it doesn't put any cornflakes on his table.
All right, so go to www.foodsarenotdrugs.com. Check out the show notes. You'll see the links to all the articles and everything that was there. If you want to give us your opinion, ask a question, comment on this episode, call the numbers at www.foodsarenotdrugs.com on the top right-hand side of the screen. You'll see the dial-in access numbers to get a hold of us, and we can get your comments onto the show. Have a great week, and we'll see you again next week.
It's been a pleasure, Andrew, and again, we'll see you next time.